Okay, hello everyone. We're going to get started on our next session. In this session we have two guest speakers and we have a number of short videos that we've made at schools recently about inclusion, so we'll show those too. I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Ashley Ryan is Principal at Burralee Primary School in Doncaster. He's going to talk about inclusion, mindset and culture and how he's developed that within his school. Okay, so please welcome Ashley. Thank you.
All right, so it's mindset and culture as well, is it? Okay. It's funny, when I was first asked to come and talk here, I was really pleased to be asked to come and talk about the inclusive nature of our school, but I was also incredibly surprised because I thought, well, that's what you just do. You are an inclusive school. And it has become the norm at my school. I suppose in essence what we believe is that children with special needs are just part of the normal mix of students that we have at Burralee, along with all of our highly talented kids, the 30 different nationalities, the 25 languages other than English spoken at home. We've got 58% EAL in preps, major religions, all of them. It's just the difference is the norm at our school. And our students, staff and parents have all see these differences just part of the normal distribution curve. So it's right now, it's not unusual to have kids with disabilities at our school and everyone just accepts that's the way it is. But that culture of acceptance and inclusion hasn't come quickly. And don't ever expect change will come quickly. If you've got a school that doesn't have that attitude at the moment, it might take some time to get there. Whenever we have any special needs students, they take part in every single activity at school. They were all at our sports day a couple of weeks ago, had a great time. This morning we had our grade 3-4 camp set off. We've got 3 parents going along on that camp and they'll be sleeping overnight because their children have very special needs. A couple of them are highly anxious and so on. So where we can, we just include everyone in everything. We currently have 19 students on the PSD program. We're applying for a further 2 prep applications at the moment. We've got another 2 students whose applications are about to get underway. And we cover autism, severe behaviour disorder, intellectual disability, severe language disorder. And many of our students, of course, fall across many of those categories, so they've got multiple difficulties. It's very different to when I first came to my school in 1999. We had 1 student on the PSD program. It was very unusual. And over the ensuing years, I gradually accepted more PSD students, and it was one of those things we had to do. We had to make haste slowly rather than do it all of a sudden, because there were a lot of people who were not really up to speed with working with children with disabilities, and a lot of them thought that these children should be in a special school, and I didn't have that belief. So bit by bit, we took on extra students, and during that time, we also had a lot of teachers and a lot of aides start to get a lot of professional development. And then it just became, once they realised how easy it was to work with these students, they no longer felt it was something different. They just worked with them pretty well. So that the teachers have become more experienced, and so have the aides, and have undertaken a lot of professional development. And I'm really lucky that I've got staff members, aides and teachers who are self-starters. They go out and they research, they seek professional development, and they really care about their students. So we've got 11 integration aides working across now, and I won't get party political, but once where level 4 funding could fund an aid, it just doesn't do it anymore. So we've had to be creative with the way that we deal with things, and we have 1 aide might work with 2 or 3 students. We do have some aides have to work with a single student because they're high need and need someone with them all the time, but we sort of think of it as the whole program together, and that's the way that we make sure that everyone's looked after. In reference to John Hattie's work, when he talks about the most important person in front of a child is the teacher, I believe that is, I think when I say teacher, I think aide as well. So we spend a lot of time and a lot of money making sure that these teachers are trained and the aides are trained, because it really does matter. The PSD process, that's an interesting one. I was just talking to Cherie before, and we were talking about how some of the parents come to this, because it's very different if you're a parent compared to the professional sitting there. And I had a parent only last week in tears in the E&Q meeting because we were trying our best to get the funding we could for the child, and we were trying to say, well, you know, the worst possible day, what would he be, and so on. It's really hard, and we understand that a lot of these parents are grieving, and they will grieve for many, many years. But also, on the flip side, last year I went to a Year 12 graduation of one of our students that started with us, back about 2005, I think. And Charlie had autism, and Charlie did not speak to me for the first year of school. And then I discovered, I know this is going to be a shock, I discovered he liked trains, okay? So he would come into my office and we'd get onto the computer and we'd find Spencer Street Station, and he'd follow the rails out and he'd find where the V-line trains are, because that's what he loved, because he used to travel to Bairnsdale on the V-line train to see his grandparents. So we developed a connection. And over the years, in grade 6, Charlie, who didn't speak in prep at all, got up and gave a speech at our grade 6 graduation. And on last December, there I was at Ashwood School's presentation, and Charlie got up and there was this young man in a tuxedo. He was just looking so wonderful, and he gave a speech, thanked all of the people that had helped him throughout school, remembered his primary school people, and turned and faced our table and thanked us for what we had done for him. So it's amazing. I think one of the big things that we do at school is we just accept that these children with special needs, we need to have high expectations for every single one of them, and we do. We set goals, and they're pretty high goals, and we're pretty strict with the goals. We don't back down on it, and we find that once we do set those goals and set some targets for those children, they do extremely well. At my staff meeting the other night, last week, I said, look, I have to speak at this conference next week, because I said yes in a weak moment. And I asked them, what do you think it is about our school that makes it inclusive? Because I thought, I know what I think, but I wonder what my staff really think, because it just is the way we are. And these are some of the responses I got. Our students are used to looking after and accommodating kids who might be a little different. Kids are valued. They are challenged according to their ability level. There's a consistent approach, especially with strategies. Our special needs children contribute to the school. Others accept them and develop empathy. We talk about the child first, then consider the diagnosis. We have a Play as the Way social skills program, and that talks about acceptance and developing empathy, not just for special needs kids, for everyone. The high expectations for every student. We walk the talk, regardless of diagnosis. We treat students as they need to be treated. There's not one rule for all. So we're looking at equity versus equality. And I think that's very, very important to understand that sometimes you need to bend the rules a bit for some kids. And it's not only those. There are other children in the school that have special needs, family needs, emotional needs, that you can't have a one box fits everything. It's got to be that we need to know what the child is like. And it's not unusual to have different approaches and strategies for different children. That is a norm. And our aides and teachers are part of a really tight-knit team, and I can't begin to tell you how important that is. You have to have everyone working on the same page. When our kids go out on excursions, it's really common for our mainstream kids just to keep an eye out for our special needs kids. That's just become the way it is. And there have been probably, I think in the last 10 or so years, there was one time we were somewhere and another school was being a bit disparaging about one of our kids, and our kids just closed ranks. And it was wonderful to see, and it made my heart warm. Another example, we had a big swimming carnival a couple of years ago, and I had a boy from Bulleen Heights Special School, and he was autistic, of course, and highly talented in a very narrow way, could do algorithms, could play the piano, had difficulty reasoning, and was quite an anxious boy. And as my kids came in, he was a grade 5 boy, one of my grade 5 boys was holding him by the hand and talking to him as he came to this very, very noisy place. And I thought, now that's inclusion, because that's developing a culture in the whole school where children look out for others. Another one that happened only about 3 weeks ago, we had an assembly, and a little boy, Alvaro, he's in grade 4 now, grade 4, and he had decided he was going to play piano at the assembly. So I'd done my principal ramble and I'd handed over the school captains and they talked their little bit and they said, now Alvaro's going to come up and play piano. And Alvaro looked like he'd just been caught in the headlights. He stood up and he walked forward, he stopped, he turned around and I said, come on Alvaro. And I was talking to him for about 2 minutes and all the kids were just absolutely quiet, waiting for him. And he finally said, no. I said, that's okay, you can do it another time. He went back down to his seat. Later on in the assembly, we hand out awards, as many people do awards on a Friday assembly. And his teacher came up, and as she was waiting to hand out her weekly award, she said to me, Alvaro said he'd come up and play the piano. And I said, well, you do it, you get him up. So finally she'd handed out her award. She said, now Alvaro is going to play the piano. So Alvaro came up to the piano, once more stood there, a bit furtive. He sat down, he turned around to her and went, shh. And then he played Jingle Bells, and it wasn't very long, and he finished, and the moment he finished, the whole audience just erupted in applause and cheering. That's an inclusive culture. It's when those kids realise that what Alvaro did then was a huge thing. To actually get up and perform in front of others when you were so unsure, and then have that support from his own peers was just wonderful. And as he finished and turned and he bowed, did this lovely big bow, and then he went, yes! And I thought, how lovely is that? So that inclusion, it's not just staff, it's not just parents, it's the children as well. And there is a culture you can develop within a school, and I think it's because you make sure that those children are included every step of the way, along the way, and they actually add to our school. There's no detraction at all. They are just fantastic kids, and we love having them there, and our kids love having them there. The parents think it's wonderful. So that's a big change from having one PSD student back in 1999 to having, well, we should have about 23, and then they're all the Halo kids. We won't worry about those ones. Now you're going to see something in a moment. I think we've got little Penny, and would it be fair to say she's a bit of a character? Yes. She's a bit of a character. She's a bit of a dynamo. She spends a fair bit of time in my office. She's very good at procrastinating. Would that be? She wants to find, what's that? And I tell her, and I said, Penny, you need to go and do your work. Yeah, what's that? So, she's found my no button. I've got one of those red no buttons, and she thinks that's fantastic. So she's just a wonderful student. Last year she worked with Danielle, she's down there. Danielle's an aide, and she worked with Lalita, our prep teacher, and Clinton over there. Wave Clinton. Clinton's our grade 1 teacher this year. And Penny has really fitted in well. She follows our program of instruction very well, and I think you'll be pretty amazed at what she does. Are there any questions from anyone at all, or was that later? Do we have Q&A later? Q&A later, okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, I worked at Burley Primary School with Penny and Danielle and Lalita last year, and Ashley, and I think what really stood out to me, of all the things that Ashley said, yes, they're happening, but the partnership between the teacher and the aide, and the communication, and the sharing of concerns and positives was really strong. But also it's very obvious at that school that students are seen as individuals first. And I think that's a really strong message for all of us. We did film at Ashley's school, so we filmed at 3 schools. So you'll see parents being interviewed, teachers and aides, and we're going to show the first video of that now. So thank you. Okay, so that was called Starting School. I think it could equally be called Starting a New Year Level, so it's the same messages for teachers and aides from parents and from educators. Okay, we're going to go across now to Paul Maisey. Paul Maisey is the Student Welfare Coordinator at Newport Gardens. We've worked with the school for a number of years. There's 2 students there. I'll let Paul talk more about that. But another example of fantastic attitude and mindset at the school. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Well, this is a bit scary up here, isn't it? I think, same as Ashley, when Cherie said, would you like to speak at our conference? Because you guys are really good at inclusion. I'm like, really? Are we? Are we actually good at this thing? And we started to have a look at the kids that we were helping, and we have 9 on the PSD program, 2 students with Down syndrome. We're like, are we really good at this? And I think when we looked at it, and I spoke to the ES staff, part of my job is being in charge, but not really. I just kind of corral them in the right direction. The ES staff at our school, I said, are we really good at this? And they're like, well, yeah, we are really good. And we've made a lot of changes. So it was nice to reflect on that, about the way that we feel like we're more inclusive than we ever were. And I guess I'll just drop back a little bit for our story. The first part of that is, not only do we have our 2 wonderful students, but we have 2 students working with Down syndrome. Or we have 2 kids with complex needs. Or we have 2 Down syndrome kids. Or we have 2 students. Hang on a second. We always think about the name. It's a bit awkward. What we prefer to do is we just call them by their name. They're not Armani with Down syndrome. They're just Armani. And they're not Aya with Down syndrome. They're just Aya. Because we know that every kid at our school has complex needs. Every single one. Everyone comes from a late night out because their parents took them out last night. Everyone comes from a broken family where it's really complex because mum and dad were yelling at each other last night. Everyone has a complex issue. They hurt their foot in footy. They can't do PE today. There's all these complex issues. And for us, for Amani and for Aya, they're just complex issues. And for us, all we have to do is work out what they are and how we can best teach them. We don't try at our school, there's no motto of, get them to the next level, get them to the next level. It's right, what do they need now and what are we going to teach next? And we've looked at that from the very beginning. Right, what do they need? What do these 2 need? And part of working with Cherie and Down Syndrome Victoria has helped us to understand what that is. And I think what we learned along that way is we learned that we need to understand who they are. Like with every kid in your grade. Who are they? What do they need? What do they do? What do they like? How do they learn best? What's happening? And I think building a relationship and finding out who these kids are has really helped us along the way. So when I talk about kids with Down syndrome, or our kids on the PSD program, I don't talk about them and their illness or their disability or whatever it is that their challenge is. We just talk about them. We'll go past the name. We'll leave the name alone. Now, I know Graham was talking, I think, earlier this morning about how you should officially say all this stuff. We just call them Amani and we just call them Aya. And you see their wonderful photos. So if you have a look at that one over there, where they're lined up, that's our school. And Aya is at the back. Yep, if you can't recognise Aya. And we put faces to the names of the people because we've also got Amani. I think she's on one of those brochures over there. Andrew. I want to get Andrew into it because Andrew teaches Aya and Steph next to him. Wave, you guys. Excellent. So hold that brochure up. Yeah, that's Amani. Most of my stories are about Amani. That's her on the front of that. Because we now know Amani. We have a relationship with her. I know firsthand that she is stubborn, that she is funny, that she has a great sense of humour. I've learned over time, especially with some research I've done, that when I tell her my jokes, I need to give her time to respond. She understands them immediately. She doesn't laugh because they're not funny to her, but she will respond given time. So I know that because I know these kids, and we encourage our teachers to do the same. I'll just check my notes and make sure I don't mess anything up. Good. I'm going to give a few examples, if that's all right, just from our school, and we'll have questions, of course, later on. When we first looked at whether we were inclusive or not, and certainly our 2 students, Amani and Aya, we looked at what we supplied them with and how we helped them to learn. So the first thing we did, we said, right, what do our ES staff do? What do you do? So at the time when I first started in this job, we had one ES staff member directly with one student next to them, and they sat next to them. And I observed them. They helped them open their lunchbox. And when things were hard, they made it easy. And they really helped them out, and they unzipped their top for them, and they followed them out at lunchtime. And it was wonderful. They were so helpful. It was amazing. But they were only helping me, and they were only helping themselves. They weren't helping the kids. Not at all. Because they'd become reliant on what they were doing. They couldn't do anything. Amani couldn't do it for herself. Not because she couldn't do it. She could do it. It's because we wouldn't let her. We had to let them have a chance to make the mistakes, teach them. So When I saw all those things, we had our ES staff member and they knew each one by name and it was wonderful. We made a few changes after we recognised that, hang on, they're relying on us, these kids, not just our Down syndrome kids, but all of them. They're reliant on us. So let's step back and stop messing it up and give them a chance to learn. So what we did was we decided that we'd have 2 ES staff minimum per student. So you couldn't rely on one person. And we told the story, well, I started the story off with if they got hit by a bus, but that got some negativity. So it was like if they won Tatslotto and left, then who would you talk to? Who would be that person who knew about you? Who would be that person you had a relationship with? We need more than one in our lives. And we sold it like that. And we sold it to the parents like that. Because parents came into our SSGs and they're like, right, I'm level 4 funded. That means I get an aide sitting next to me doing this, 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 and this. And then, of course, I closed that book and said, well, this is how we're going to spend the money because this is how we decide we're going to do this, 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 and this. We're going to provide supports. We're going to do programs. We'll work on independence. At least 2 people will be working with your child, minimum. They're like, oh, what are you going to do that for? I said, because they need to learn how to do this stuff for themselves. We're not going to be funded your whole life. We're not going to follow you around. We're not going to come to your house after school and sort things out for you. We need to learn how to do this. We're going to work with the ES and we'll work with the teachers so that sometimes we'll support them with a program or a system or a structure so that they can do it themselves. And we knew they could. And for us, that made a really big change. It made a change with the way our students learnt and it made a change already with how independent they have become. So if it was something we were doing, instead of having an ES do it, we'd put a system in place and we'd explicitly teach it. Then we'd move away and we'd look at the next thing. And we just kept adding those things so they become more and more independent. And it wasn't me, it was partly the ES, but it was also the teachers, which is why those 2 wonderful teachers are over there. They came up with the systems. And the examples I'll give are, they came up with the idea of, to work independently, Amani has a green mat that is for independent work. So whenever she's working on that green mat, she has to do it herself. So instead of going over and asking for support, she knows that this task is for her. She knows that she can do it because we already know she can, and she knows it's her time to do it. And that's her independent time, instead of relying on somebody else. Becoming more independent. Does that help her learning? Absolutely it does. She takes pride in the work that she does because she can do it herself. As soon as she's done something on that, she's wandering up to my office or to the principal's office and we're covering her in stickers and she loves it because it's her work. She did it. It wasn't an ES doing the work and making it look beautiful because that looks nice, right? You get that piece of work and you show the parents, look what they did. Oh, it's my handwriting, but they did it. Well, mostly my ideas, but they did it. But, well, they were there while I did it. You know, like, is it their work or is it your work? And we kept asking those questions. You know, are they learning? What does that mean? And for us, it made a huge difference for those 2 kids, but for all of our PSD kids. We added in a few other things. I talked to about Amani before. I use her a lot because we have a really great relationship. It's love-hate. Some days she loves me. Most days she hates me. But she is stubborn. She sits out in the yard. When she's had enough, she just sits down. And I tell you what, she's hard to move. She is really hard to move. And all the tricks sometimes don't work. And you might be thinking, oh yeah, we've got a kid who does that. However, what we know is if we give her enough time to have a rest, that she can come back. She gets tired. Her gross motor skills are really low. She has trouble moving. But we get her moving and we give her a chance to rest. And then we get her moving and we give her a chance to rest. And then we work it out so that we get the most learning we can out of her in a day. And that's our goal, the most learning. It's not how come Amani gets to have a rest while we're all doing work. Our kids understand that. They understand that, hey, that's what Amani needs. You might need a pair of glasses. You might need to sit up the front because it's easy. You might need one of those wiggle chairs because it's hard to sit still. Everyone needs something different, but all it does is help to learn. So that's the way we approach it. That's the way we've changed our culture so that it's not, oh, we'll take Amani or we'll take Aya out the back and we'll fix them and then we'll bring them back. We don't fix anyone. We don't bring them back. We just see what they need next. We work on that. We make sure that we understand and that they understand what to do, and then we move forward from there. So that's worked really well for us. Probably the last thing I'll add to that is that we connect with the parents. We don't just use the SSG. We're always connecting with the parents. And the best part that's come out of that is they want their kids to learn. And you know what kids want to learn? And they want us to push them. Like, push them. Why are they only learning this? They're like every other parent in our school. We know they can do it. Push them. And the more you get to know your students, the more you can push them, the more you get out of them. Okay? And don't be afraid to push it. And don't be afraid to make a few mistakes. God knows we've stuffed a few up, that's for sure. Gone too hard. But we do. We change it so that they're involved in everything and that the rules are the same. It's not Amani rules and Aya rules and school rules. It's just school rules. It takes Amani 20 minutes to eat a 10-minute lunch. We don't start her early and miss out on learning time. We just tell her to take it outside like we do with all the other kids and eat out there, because that's what all the kids do. We don't take away from that valuable learning time. So all of these things have worked with us because we focus on building the relationship, we focus on the kids, and we want them to learn. And I guess my takeaway message, if it was for anyone, was find out what they can do and push every one of those kids, because they can learn. They really can. Thanks.
Okay, fantastic to hear from Ashley and Paul. And I really like Paul's message about building independence. That is our ultimate goal with every student. So it's something to be really mindful of in the classroom. We're going to finish this session now with the 2 videos, and then we'll have some question and answers from there.